Next, Ohio has voted to keep abortion rights in the state. The vote's been framed as key on this issue leading up to next year's presidential election in the US, and it was an important test after the Supreme Court scrapped the 1973 Roe v. Wade ruling, effectively banning abortion on a federal level. With each state now free to decide, there are lobbies either side, eyeing 12 other states where such similar votes are scheduled. Meanwhile, Republican presidential candidates set to meet in debate this Wednesday, again snubbed by the clear frontrunner for the Republican nomination, Donald Trump, as the party's increasingly hard-line position on abortion faces scrutiny after these disappointing state elections. Disappointing from their angle, I suppose. Not, of course, if you're for choice in that matter. Eric Lisann joins us, a former federal prosecutor, and I'm sure you know, our go-to person on matters legal, stateside, and so much more. Eric, always a pleasure to have you. Tell us, how important is this Ohio vote?
Good evening, Mark. It's always a pleasure to be here with you. The Ohio vote is very important. It's a bellwether, and it was very specific to abortion. So it showed at a minimum that support for abortion rights is significant, almost overwhelming, even in a red state such as Ohio. So it can be seen as a bellwether for other contests around the nation, and as something that boosts the lean, as poll prognosticators or election watchers would call, in a particular area towards the blue color, the Democratic side of the spectrum.
So in terms of thinking about going forward to the presidential debate and the presidential election, is this likely to become a very important issue, do you think? Is this a real sign of what we can expect in the months to come?
Well, in terms of communication strategy, certainly anybody watching it would say, yes, this is something that Democrats should emphasize and Republicans should de-emphasize. The problem for Republicans is that a significant part of the coalition that they've cobbled together to support Trump, which has taken over the party, doesn't want to let go of this issue in any way. And they're sort of cemented in that belief because of the efforts they had to put in to get Supreme Court justices to take away the previously existing constitutional right to privacy in health and reproductive decisions that they had fought for so hard for many years, even decades. So they're sort of entrenched in that position, and it's one that outside of the really red areas in the South and a little bit in the West of the United States is going to cost them at the polls. But the battle lines seem to have been drawn, and it's going to be very difficult for them to change that. I did see that on social media, the very Trumpist Ohio Senator J.D. Vance broadcast that, in fact, Republicans should abandon this. It's clearly an electoral loser, but it's going to be difficult to see how this can be implemented by Republicans now.
You have preempted my next question. Will this become a possible Achilles heel for whoever becomes the Republican candidate, be it Trump, be it somebody else?
It should be an Achilles heel outside of the core, almost evangelical extremists who do back Trump and provide a lot of the energy and momentum for his campaign. We saw also in Virginia, and this is very important, a flipping of both houses, or a flipping of one house of the legislature and a retention of the other house of the legislature to Democrats, despite the fact that a Republican governor, a sort of a Trump light, Glenn Youngkin, had been there and had said this would be a mandate on what he called a more moderate position on abortion rights. And even that was resoundingly rejected in Virginia by the voters and blew up in Youngkin's face as he lost any support in the legislature because of that. Even in Ohio, by the way, there was a 13% differential, and the language was very confusing to voters. It almost made it concealed what the intention of the issue was, to make it sound as if voters were voting on something other than an assessment of the right to abortion and privacy. So it's going to be a problem for Republicans.
Can I just end with a question which is more on the legal situation and the availability then of a termination should a woman choose to have that? In France, of course, obviously with the separation of the state and church going back to 1905, the idea that this would be an issue that someone would vote on because of their religious beliefs would not be part of the equation, one would imagine. However, in the US, it is a very different situation. So, given the situation, the overturning of Roe versus Wade, the vote in Ohio, maybe that says something about Ohio. But in general, women in the US, if they want a termination, Eric, where do they stand legally?
Well, it depends very much now on the state that they're in. And there's a wide contrast between, and it's generally along political lines, there's a wide contrast between the rights in certain states and in others. In these extremist states, such as, for example, Texas being a very big one, but not the only one, there's an attempt to actually criminalize abortion and even criminalize the attempt to leave the state to go to another state. The legality of that is very much in question. In fact, it's probably illegal, but this is something that's going to have to be decided through the courts. And again, depending on which court and which judge gets the case, we don't know what the determination will be. We see even in terms of military readiness, an Alabama Senator, Tommy Tuberville, has raised this to the point where he's blocking all military confirmations because he doesn't want military women to be able to change states in order for reproductive or health care that involve this. So there are many legal issues, and it does depend to a large extent on which judges get it, which is also, they get the case, which is also a political issue ultimately, because Trump and others like him are saying they're even bragging about their ability to push through judges that will enforce this sort of extremist revision of what the abortion laws in the United States have been for at least 50 years.
Eric Lisann, as always, thank you for joining us, sir. We appreciate your clarity. Thank you very much indeed. Eric Lisann, joining us from the US, legal analyst, as we hear, obviously as well, political expert too.